One of television's most beloved comedic actors was secretly fighting battles behind the scenes that would shock you. Johnny Brown, the man who made us laugh as Nathan Bookman on Good Times, was dealing with drama so intense it could have ended careers. But here's the twist. Nobody knew about it because he kept smiling through it all. By the end of this video, you'll never watch Good Times the same way again. I'm about to reveal the explosive truth about Johnny Brown's Hollywood journey, including the role he almost got that would have changed television history, the heated confrontations with producers that were kept secret for decades, and the financial betrayal that left him struggling despite being on one of America's biggest shows. Trust me, this story has more twists than a soap opera, so make sure you're subscribed because we're diving deep into the business today. Picture this. It's 1937 in St. Petersburg, Florida, and a baby boy is born who will grow up to become one of television's most recognizable faces. But Johnny Brown's path to stardom wasn't some fairy tale. It was a grinding, relentless climb through a system designed to keep people like him on the sidelines. When his family moved to Harlem, young Johnny discovered he had something special. The neighborhood kids would gather around just to hear him sing, and by 15, he was performing in nightclubs. 15 years old, y'all. Can you imagine being that young in grown folks' business? But here's what they don't tell you in those sanitized Hollywood biographies. Johnny was dealing with the harsh realities of being a black performer in the 1950s. He'd headline shows but have to enter through the back door. He'd bring the house, down with his talent, then face humiliation just walking to his dressing room. This treatment would have broken many people, but it was building something fierce inside Johnny Brown. Something that would serve him well when he faced even bigger battles later in his career. The breakthrough moment came in 1964 when Johnny landed a role in the Broadway production of Golden Boy alongside the legendary Sammy Davis Jr. This wasn't just any gig. This was his ticket to the big leagues. Sammy saw something in Johnny that others had missed, and suddenly doors started opening. Johnny became a regular on Laugh-In, that wild variety show that everyone was talking about in the late 60s. He was finally getting the recognition his talent deserved. But hold up, here's where the story gets really interesting. Johnny Brown was this close to playing Lamont on Sanford and Son. Imagine that alternate universe where instead of Demon Wilson, it was Johnny Brown calling Red Fox a big dummy every week. The streets have been whispering about why that didn't happen for decades. Some insiders claim Red Fox himself blocked it because he knew Johnny was too funny and might steal scenes. I'm not saying that's what happened, but the timing was suspicious. Back then, there were so few good roles for black actors that everyone was fighting like it was the last piece of chicken at a family reunion. When Johnny finally joined Good Times in season 2, he walked into a powder keg. Esther Rolla and John Amos were already at war with the producers over JJ's buffoonish antics. They wanted dignity, but the network wanted stereotypes that made white audiences comfortable. Johnny found himself caught in the middle, playing Nathan. Bookman, the building superintendent whose entire purpose seemed to be getting insulted by the Evans family. Every episode, somebody was calling him Buffalo Butt or making fun of his weight. You think that didn't get old fast? Here's some exclusive tea that never made it to the entertainment magazines. Johnny had reached his breaking point during one particular week of filming. My industry sources tell me he marched straight into the producer's office and demanded his character get more dimension than just being the punchline. He wanted Bookman to have feelings, depth, maybe even a storyline that didn't revolve around fat jokes. But you know how Hollywood operates? They patted him on the head and kept it moving. The disrespect was real. The situation got worse as JJ started taking over the entire show. Jimmy Walker's dynamite catchphrase was bringing in ratings. So the network pushed everyone else to the sidelines. Johnny would show up, get insulted, and that was his whole contribution to the episode. Can you imagine being that talented, able to sing, dance, and deliver comedy gold, only to be reduced to a walking fat joke? The man had range for days, but they boxed him into this tiny, humiliating corner. What really burned Johnny up was the screen time inequality. While JJ was getting all the promotional opportunities and magazine covers, actors like Johnny were treated like they were disposable. During the show's peak popularity, Johnny refused to participate in a major publicity tour unless everyone got equal treatment. He didn't make a public scene about it, but behind closed doors, he was standing firm. The rest of the cast respected him for it, even if the public never knew about his quiet rebellion. The tension between Johnny and producer Norman Lear was thick enough to cut with a knife. Johnny kept pitching episode ideas that would show Bookman as a complete human being, not just comic relief. He wanted storylines that explored the character's background, his struggles, maybe even a romantic interest. But Lear and the other producers kept shutting him down to make more room for JJ's antics. People who worked on set said you could feel the tension radiating from Johnny when he'd get yet another script where his only purpose was to walk in and get roasted. After Good Times ended in 1979, Johnny ran headfirst into every black actor's nightmare, being typecast. Directors couldn't see past Bookman. They'd look at this incredibly versatile performer and only see the fat superintendent who got picked on. It was career suicide by association, and there was nothing Johnny could do about it. Every audition, every meeting, people just saw Buffalo. But instead of the skilled entertainer, he really was. The cruel irony reached its peak when Johnny was supposed to join the Love Boat cast in the early 80s. He was in serious talks for a recurring role that would have been perfect for showcasing his range. Then, mysteriously, the whole thing fell apart. My sources in the industry say a network executive killed the deal by claiming they already had enough diversity with Ted Lang as Isaac. One black person was apparently enough for the entire cruise ship. They never said this to Johnny's face, of course. The role just went in another direction, which we all know is Hollywood code for discrimination. Let's talk about the money situation, because this will really make your blood boil. Johnny was on one of the biggest shows of the 1970s, but those contracts back then were straight-up robbery. While Good Times continued making millions in reruns for decades, actors like Johnny were getting residual checks that wouldn't cover a tank of gas. The math wasn't mathing, and there was nothing they could do about it. The system was designed to extract maximum value from their talent while giving them minimum compensation. Despite all this professional drama, Johnny's personal life was surprisingly stable. He married June Russell in 1961, and they stayed together for 60 years until he passed. 60 years of marriage in Hollywood is like finding a unicorn riding a dinosaur. It just doesn't happen. They had 2 children, Sharon and John Jr., and Johnny was a family man first, entertainer second. This commitment to family might have actually cost him bigger opportunities. Word is he turned down several national tours and film roles because he didn't want to be away from his kids for months at a time. The heartbreak hit hard when his Good Times co-star Jeanette Dubois passed away in 2020. These weren't just co-workers. They were genuine friends who stayed in touch decades after the show ended. They'd do appearances together, share stories about the old days, and support each other through the industry's ups and downs. When she died, Johnny took it harder than most people realized. What makes it even more tragic is that right before COVID hit, Johnny was organizing a whole Good Times reunion project with surviving cast members. Then the pandemic shut everything down, leaving him isolated from his friends and fans during his final years. During the show's peak, Johnny had another confrontation with CBS executives that never made headlines. The network was pushing JJ, Thelma, and Michael for all the magazine covers and press appearances while treating the adult actors like they were invisible. Johnny had enough and refused to participate in a major publicity tour unless everyone got equal billing and treatment. He didn't make a public fuss about it, but behind closed doors, he was standing 10 toes down. The rest of the cast saw him fighting for their dignity, even when the cameras weren't rolling. As Johnny aged, he dealt with the same challenges we all watch our parents and grandparents face. But he kept performing well into his senior years, getting back to his roots with live shows and musical theater. The man could really sing, remember? TV audiences barely got to see that side of his talent because he was locked into the Bookman character. He became a favorite at Black TV conventions and nostalgia events. And unlike some celebrities who act like they're doing fans a favor by showing up, Johnny was genuinely grateful. He'd sit there all day telling stories, signing autographs, and making people feel special. Here's the financial reality that'll shock you. When Johnny passed in 2022, his net worth was around $2 million. Now that might sound like a lot to regular folks, but for someone who was on one of the biggest shows in television history, that's practically nothing. These streaming services are still making bank off Good Times reruns, while the actual stars never saw the checks they deserved. The system failed him financially, just like it failed him creatively. In his final years, Johnny was working on his autobiography, planning to spill all the tea from his decades in Hollywood. Unfortunately, he passed before he could finish it, taking some of those industry secrets to the grave with him. Can you imagine what revelations that book would have contained? The behind-the-scenes stories, the quiet battles, the discrimination he faced, all of it lost forever. Johnny Brown's legacy goes far beyond Buffalo Butt jokes and building superintendent sketches. He was part of that first wave of black performers who kicked down doors so others could walk through them. Every time he pushed back against a stereotype, every time he demanded better treatment, every time he stood up for his dignity, he was making it easier for the next generation. His impact on television comedy is undeniable, but his impact on the industry's treatment of black actors might be even more significant. The next time you watch Good Times reruns and find yourself laughing at Bookman's antics, remember there was a whole complicated, talented man behind that character. A man who was fighting battles we never saw, dealing with disrespect we never knew about, and still managing to bring joy to millions of viewers every week. Johnny Brown gave us decades of laughter while navigating an industry that often didn't give him the respect he deserved. That smile we saw on screen, it was covering up frustration, disappointment, and determination that most of us will never fully understand. Johnny Brown wasn't just an actor playing a role. He was a pioneer fighting for dignity in an industry that wanted to reduce him to a punchline. His story reminds us that behind every character we love, there's a real person with real struggles, real dreams, and real courage. So the next time someone tries to dismiss classic television as simple entertainment, remember Johnny Brown's story. Remember the battles fought behind the scenes, the dignity maintained under pressure, and the doors opened for future generations. That's the real legacy of Nathan Bookman's Buffalo Butt. Not the jokes themselves, but the man who had the strength to keep smiling through it all while fighting for something better.